The lore. The lore is real, and we got more of it! Or did we? November is gonna be a very interesting month for me. As a, for some reason, still a WoW player, we're gonna get BlizzCon with the main focus being WoW. We're gonna get Blizzard's first ever mobile game, which certainly seems to have the potential for content. But most importantly, Song of Nunu will be out, with it being a game that was confirmed to be canon in the newly updated universe. Now, as you may remember, up to this point, every Riot Forge game was canon, with the exception of something like Hextech Mayhem, and now, unfortunately, also Convergence, since Arcane just got to overwrite everything. But hey, Ruined King and the Mage Seeker are still good. The thing is, some of these games got a comic as a prequel to the story which would be told by the game, with Mage Seeker getting the amazing Katarina comic, which essentially explained why Katarina can now magically hop around, and Convergence got a comic that focused on Victor doing villainous things, which we are still not sure if it's entirely canon now. Especially since, again, Arcane is doing what it's doing now. But the good news is that yes, Song of Nunu also got its own comic. And given how wholesome this entire game seems to be, I'm pretty sure this comic is going to be an awesome read. And it will give us quite a lot of the canonical story background. What's that asterisk doing there? Yup, unfortunately, things are not as flawless as we thought they would be, which becomes apparent right at the beginning. So without further ado, let's dive into the Song of Nunu comic, and let's have a look at what is happening there. The culprit of the asterisk lies in the introduction, which reads: "This comic is an alternate or inspired story of how Nunu and Willump met. It was written in collaboration with our wonderful partners to enhance the overall game experience created by Tequila Works, which are the developers behind this game. We hope you enjoy reading this as much as we enjoyed writing it." So yes, right at the beginning, the comic confirms that it is not 100% canon. A lot of it will be, but it is still based on the canon lore. But you'll see there will be some small differences. I believe the reason why all of this happened is because Song of Nunu has been in development for a very long time. So they probably started writing all of this before they even knew that they would be unifying the entire universe. One proof of this could be that you can see Odin, also known as Warg Bubbo, still credited in this comic, with the catch being that he left Riot quite a while ago. With that said, I think this is totally fine as long as the game itself is sticking to canon lore, with some obvious differences based on gameplay itself. Also, I have to give Riot props for this statement. When we got the lore update, Laura went onto Reddit and she confirmed that they are working on a way to let people know what is going to be canon and what is not. So just for the people who really care about this, I assume this is the outcome of that. Anyway, with all of this mentioned, let's dive right into the comic. The story begins with an introduction of Nunu, a kid from the traveling No-Tai tribe who just likes to have snowball fights, though it seems to be difficult for him to find a friend. And so, most of the time, he would be playing on his own. Now, based on the fact that Nunu already has Swelsongur, which is the flute, which he pretends to be a sword, the story has to be happening after his caravan was already attacked by raiders, and he got separated from his mother. After which, according to the original story, he would be dragged out by the Frost Guard, and he would even get to meet Lysandra, who questioned him about his mother, because she was looking for a very specific song. One that was about a particular Yeti. After which, trying to be the hero he always wanted to be, he snuck out to face that monstrous Yeti. This was just a super TLDR version of his story, which I wanted to bring up because it seems like the comic is happening after all of that. So, in the comic, Nunu overhears some hunters talking about a beast, one that lived in a cave beyond a ruined village. The hunters then notice Nunu and realize that he is one of the No-Tai, so they ask him about the caravan. After which, the comic actually very quickly shows us the raid, which confirms the story is happening after all of that. Although the key difference might be that here they are just leaving out the entire part about Lysandra. Unfortunately though, the hunters can't help Nunu find his mother, because apparently someone put a bounty on the beast which they are tracking down. So, once again, trying to prove himself and his mom that he can be a hero, he ventured out to conquer the beast as well. On his travels, he saw herds of goats, which I assume we will see in the game, as well as destroyed ruins, which I also believe will be in the game. And he even saw camps of other hunters who were also going after the beast, before he finally arrived at the cave where the beast lived. And after getting closer, Nunu got confused because the beast didn't really look dangerous. In fact, it was very fluffy and somehow not monstrous at all. Instead, Nunu realized the beast was just grumpy. And after witnessing how the beast missed his friends too, he approached it as a friend. At first, the beast got confused, so it tried to scare Nunu off. Which is where we found out that somehow Nunu could understand the beast. And neither of them really knew why it was possible, which is where the first chapter ends. Chapter 2 then begins with the two playing a snowball fight. They played like this for a while, until, through all the fun, Nunu broke the flute which he had in his backpack. Of course, the flute was the thing that his mom gave him, he was supposed to keep it safe. And it was the last memory he had of his mom, which is why Nunu had a little bit of a breakdown. So he hugged his beastly friend, who sang him a lullaby until Nunu fell asleep. The next morning, when he woke up, the beast was waiting for him with his flute fixed. After which, the two ventured out for a breakfast. They found some frostberries and selfishly they were all gobbled up by the beast. This is where the two started talking about friendship and how true friends play games together, so of course, they did as well. They played sled racing, snow fort attack, and even hide and seek. Which, by the way, I really believe is a teaser for all the minigames we will see in the game. It sounds kinda similar to what was shown in the trailers. Anyway, when it comes to hide and seek, the beast was a little too good at it. So for a while, Nunu simply couldn't find it. And instead, he found some merc wolves, which led into the beast appearing to save him by grabbing the wolves and throwing them away. Of course, again, I do believe this is a bit of a teaser that there will be some combat in the game. And this is where we get an interesting reveal. In this part, Nunu simply asked the beast what was his name. And the beast told him Willump. The thing is, according to the Canon story, Willump has a different name which is too difficult for Nunu to pronounce. So Nunu simply gave him the name Willump. So here, as you can see, there is a tiny difference in this comic compared to the Canon story. Anyway, after this, the two hurry back to the cave and find out that the other hunters have arrived. But instead of directly facing them, Nunu convinces Willump to hide. Nunu would simply try to protect him. Which takes us into chapter 3. Here, as the hunters approach the cave, the first thing they see is Nunu, who tried to convince them that he managed to scare the beast off. Of course, the hunters didn't necessarily buy into it. And things got worse when Willump sneezed while hiding in the cave. So of course, the two had to resort to plan B. And so while the hunters pushed into the cave, Willump had a giant snowball fight with them, after which the two fled. They traveled for a while, and to make their traveling easier, Nunu started playing a song, one that wasn't one of the happiest ones. The lyrics were, "The gods are gone, the world their forge, now flames are gone, and words are torch. Against the cold, the song I sing, a speak of my own forging." While this one did make the traveling easier, it didn't really raise their spirits because Nunu remembered his mom and Willump remembered his lost friends. But at the very least, they now had each other. They traveled for a bit longer before they arrived at a village. Even better, it was a village that was hosting a cheese festival. There were eating contests, Elnuk cheese carving, and even cheese racing. And since Nunu was so hungry, he was ready to dive in. But while he was having fun tasting all the cheese, Willump stayed outside. And in fact, Nunu ate so much cheese that he seemingly passed out. And when he woke up, everyone went home and everyone was gone, including Willump. Which takes us to chapter 4. Here Nunu ran around the village looking for him. When he couldn't find him, he ran outside the village. There he found his tracks and decided to follow them. As a side note, here the comic shows us an icy crag, which I'm pretty sure we will find in the game. Nunu looked for Willump for a very long time and things started getting hopeless. But eventually, he found him sleeping under a bridge. But while Nunu was happy to find him again, Willump told him that Nunu would be way happier if he stayed in that village. And while the two argued, we get to see some suspicious raiders walking above them. Anyway, eventually Nunu admits that he knows that Yetis can't just walk into a village. And so... that's right! They disguised Willump as a human. And what's amazing is that it worked. I think this is one of the reasons why the comic shouldn't be taken as 100% canon. Anyway, together, Nunu and Willump played all the cheesy games. They ate a lot more cheese, and simply said they had fun until they passed out. But when they woke up, they were surprised by an ambush from raiders. In this scene, we have a couple of things to point out. First of all, there is a shop with hats. Here you can find some Yeti hats and a hat that should be very familiar to you. And also, one of the raiders raiding this village is a Poro. Anyway, Nunu tried to wake Willump up, but it didn't work. So, being the great hero he is, Nunu decided to confront the raiders himself. Of course, the raiders didn't take him seriously, but their boss, called Yumaruk, didn't have time for games. She approached Nunu, realized that he was a Notai, and asked about his caravan, which indicates that these raiders were not the same ones who raided their tribe. And in fact, Nunu calls her out. And the boss simply replied that in the Freljord, people have to do what they must to survive. A beginning to Nunu's first fight. Which takes us into the final chapter. This chapter begins with a flashback from Nunu's mom. Here we learn that while Nunu was playing to be a great Notai warrior, her mom told him that a true Notai songweaver should be playing a song to calm the enemy down, not to hurt them. Because the Notai did not believe in war, they believed in stories. And so, in this conflict, Nunu started playing a song about the Mountain King. It was a tale that happened before men walked into the Freljord, when the land was young and the first snow was yet to fall. There was a single king who ruled over all. He was taller than the trees and stronger than the winds. His voice was a thunder and his breath covered the lands in snow. His claws carved rivers and streams. The king grabbed the earth and jumped high into the air, making the very first mountains, so that he would have a throne from which he could rule. And everyone who would cross the king would face his true ice claws. Even now, during the deepest winters, people could hear the king's howl, warning any who would harm those under his protection that his claws and teeth were still sharp. After telling this tale, the boss wasn't too impressed. But of course, every story starts in a place of truth. And so Nunu just stalled enough for Willump to wake up. After which, Nunu made a quick process of the raiders and scared them away. After which, Nunu confirmed that the story he told was made up. Which is sad, because honestly it would be awesome to have a Yeti as a demigod besides the others such as Orn. Anyway, after the battle was over, the villagers got scared of Willump. And so Nunu had to convince them all that Willump wasn't evil, and that he wouldn't harm anyone. He was just a grumpy Yeti who lost his people. And he would be a great friend if they gave him a chance. And so that's what the villagers did. They hesitated a bit, but then they presented them with a present. A hat for helping them. Which of course is the hat which Nunu has always been wearing the entire time in League of Legends. So now we know where it came from. After this, the entire village celebrated their saviors, and in the end, Nunu and Willump left the village. Here, Nunu admitted that he wouldn't be able to find his mom alone. He would need the help of a friend. So he asked Willump, and of course, Willump wouldn't hesitate. And so the two continued on their quest to find Nunu's mom, which is where the comic ends and where I assume the game Song of Nunu will begin. So now I have a few things to point out. First of all, the differences between the comic and the canon story don't seem to be that big. Like, if you want to pretend that the comic is totally canon, I think you'll be totally fine. It's mostly the fact that people would be probably able to tell that Willump is not a human. And sure, Willump's real name should be something else. But the biggest difference is something we haven't mentioned yet. In the Canon story, Willump should actually be a bit more monstrous. And it shaped its form into a Yeti after he met Nunu. In fact, it should be a magical creature that was shaped by Nunu's imagination. So I wonder if this is why the comic shouldn't be considered entirely canon. It's gonna be either this or the fact that they skipped the entire part with Lysandra at the beginning. Which, to be fair, didn't really affect this comic at all. Now, when it comes to the comic itself, aesthetically, I think this is the best one they have ever released. I absolutely adore the style, and I wish I had a physical copy of this one. It was such a good one. And I hope they keep giving us more of these. Which also made me realize something. Since all the Riot Forge games seem to be coming out with their own comics, does that mean that Bandletale will get one too? There is no way Vygar will be in a comic.